So I'm going to begin with a prop, because to stay interesting and creative, sometimes you just need props. And so I wish we had high tech ready here, but we don't. Someday it'll be like in the round on the walls, but for now I'm going to read it to you, and I'll move it around, but I'm going to read it to you. It's a riddle. Some of you have done this with me or seen it with me. Some of you haven't. If you know the answer, don't give it away. We're going to spend a few minutes trying to solve this riddle. So here it is. We're going to figure out who the man is that we're talking about. What's the context that I'm describing? A man is wearing a mask. Okay, that's all we know so far. A man is wearing a mask. The man is at home. Another man is coming toward the man in the mask. The man is afraid. I'm going to say it again. A man is wearing a mask. The man is at home, right? Another man is coming towards the man in the mask. The man is afraid. So maybe turn to the person next to you, or just try and work through this. Who is the man in the mask, right? Who is the man? Just take a moment, try and process it. Man is wearing a mask. The man is at home. Another man is coming toward the man in the mask. The man is afraid. We'll do it over here for a little bit. Okay, so now you can start asking some questions. Don't spout out the answer. And if you know it, put your hand up. Who is the man in the mask? So the man is himself. That's way too esoteric. Okay, that's way too deep. I don't want to be deep. I want to be very simplistic here. Okay, every man. This is like the holiest group ever. I want to know who it is. This is a specific guy. This is a dude. This is somebody doing something. What is he doing? Who is he? Take off your Nosh and Drosh hats. Come on. Could be Michael Jackson's The Man in the Mirror. I'm looking in the mirror. No, but it could be. Could be. That was an awesome guess. It's a great song, but it's not. Cantor. No, you can always give things away. I'm not even calling on you. Could be a surgeon. No, that wasn't surgeon word. Could be the patient, right? Wearing an oxygen mask. No. Okay. So there's an assumption that's being made here, and the assumption hinges on one word. What's the word? Susan, what's the word, or anybody knows the answer, what's the word that everybody confuses here? Make an assumption. Which man? Everybody's focused on the man. That's not really what this hinges on. I'll just say one word, and some of you will get it. Afraid? No, there's genuine, could be genuine fear here. I'll give it away for the sake of time. The word is home. You're thinking of bricks and mortar, right? But isn't home something more than bricks and mortar? We're making an assumption that I'm talking about a house that you walk into. What now? Does anybody now get it? If you change this assumption of home, what other types of home are there? Think of a game, baseball. Now, who's the man in the mask? The catcher. Who's the other man? The person sliding into home. Who's afraid? I don't know. I've played baseball. It's kind of scary doing both. But home, right? Assumptions. That's the point of this exercise, that we too often make assumptions, and we can't solve the problem that we're dealing with because our mind is made up, because of these preconceptions of these assumptions, right? And that's what I want to talk about, assumptions. Because assumptions can be constructive, and they are important. Look, you have to be able to make an assumption like this. I assume that in 5 minutes from now, this ground will still be solid. Because if I didn't assume that, I would drive myself crazy out of fear. Just like when you go to sleep at night, I have to assume that my heart will keep beating, that I will keep breathing without having to will it so. You have to make an assumption that there will be enough food for you at the Shabbat cafe. Otherwise, there will be pandemonium and chaos and rioting. We have to make some assumptions in life, but sometimes our assumptions are not constructive, they're destructive. Like assuming out of laziness. Sometimes we just assume the past equals the future, therefore we don't have to really necessarily think things through. Sometimes we make assumptions out of arrogance, as if we know, right? Because we saw a thin slice of somebody, a thin slice of life, as Malcolm Gladwell calls it. I always try and work Malcolm Gladwell into my talks, therefore I'm hoping he hears it someday and it goes, wild on the internet. But Malcolm Gladwell says there's a thin slice of life and there's a thick slice. And oftentimes we see a thin little slice and we then say that's the whole slice. We know somebody because of the way they behaved. There's an arrogance in that kind of assumption. And the dangerous kind of assumption is when assumptions, right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, grow into, right, a sense of belief, a sense of certainty, a sense of absolutism, right? When you're absolutely sure that your assumptions were right, are right, will always be right, there is a great danger in that, and that's what we deal with in this week's Torah portion. Because actually, last week's Torah portion and the week before that, we're in the third parsha of the book of Exodus. This one's Parashat Bo. And we're in the midst of the throes of Pharaoh and Moses as they're going back and forth. But this is really a book about assumptions. What kind of assumptions? Problematic assumptions, dangerous assumptions. First and foremost, we began with the Israelites. They came to Egypt, and they assumed that because of their past reputation and actions and deeds and yichus, their connections with their forefather Joseph, that they would always be welcomed and always be treated well and always be safe. And in many ways, they rested on their laurels. And they got lulled by the comforts of Egypt. And what happened? A new king arose who challenged the assumptions. And the Israelites were not prepared, and they descended into slavery. And then in slavery, what are their assumptions? Their assumptions were that they were slaves, that their parents were slaves at a certain point, and their children would be slaves. And they gave up the challenge of the assumption that they could be free again. And what are some other assumptions? Moses is filled with all kinds of self-limiting assumptions. He can't speak, he feels like. Nobody's going to believe him. Pharaoh's not going to listen to him. The Israelites are not going to listen to him. He has all of these assumptions about himself that ultimately are a form of slavery, a sense of servitude. And then there's the assumption of Pharaoh, the quintessential, right, assumer. He assumes that these people have to be slaves. He assumes that the world he has created is the only possible world. He is so filled with arrogance that he loses the possibility of change. And that's what we watch. We watch Pharaoh go from a man who has possibility and potential. Otherwise, why would Moses come to him to say, let my people go? To give him a chance to open his mind, to open his heart. In the Torah, the heart is really thought of as the mind, the seat of thought. So he starts to close his heart. We read something in this week's Torah portion that it's challenging. It is theologically challenging. It says, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Bo el Paro, ki ani hechbadati et libo. Go to Pharaoh, God says, because I, God, have hardened his heart. What's the problem with that? If God's hardening his heart, does Pharaoh really have free will? And many of the commentators say, yes, he had free will, right? But at some point, we forfeit our free will. Maybe it's not the first drink or the first injection of a needle or the first snort of a drug. Maybe it's not the first moment when we head down a path of addiction, but at some point in all addiction, we forfeit our free will. At some point, we give up our ability to choose. It began as ours to choose, but at some point, the drug, the thing, the other, the person that we hand over our power to, they become the source of control. They determine the outcome. So the rabbis say he had free will, but at some point, midah keneged midah, the rabbis say, measure for measure. If that's what he wants to do, give up his free will, then God says, I will help you along your path. So in the end, Moses gives Pharaoh an opportunity, and Pharaoh squanders it again and again and again because he gets entrenched in his assumptions. He can't imagine a different possibility, another outcome. And that's what idolatry is. Idolatry is not bowing down to a totem pole. Idolatry is simply this. It is outsourcing our power. It is handing it over to an other, to a something outside of ourselves. Right? That is what it means to be an idolater. To believe, right, that we are powerless. To believe that the past will always be the future. Right? And to always defer to the past and not challenge the future. That is to head down a path of idolatry. Idolatry is when our assumptions become beliefs, become certainties, become absolutes, and there is nothing that could ever challenge or change them. What's the opposite of idolatry? Freedom. What's the opposite of idolatry? God. By definition, God is about possibility, infinite, right? What is God? God is Ein Sof. God is infinite, without limitations, without restriction, constriction. God is Ruach. It says that the first thing the Israelites lost was their Ruach. They were Kotzer Ruach. They lost this spirit of possibility, of infinity, and they became stuck in this routine, in this rut, in this grave. Wayne Dyer points out, isn't it interesting that almost every religion has a name for God with an open-ended sound, right? An ah sound. Buddha, Krishna. Jesus in Hebrew was Yeshua, right? The name for God, Yah, is the primary name for God in Hebrew. Allah. I mean, you just keep going on. Ah. Ah is an expansive sound. It's not a closed syllable. It's open with possibility, and that by definition is what we mean when we talk about God. And how do you enter onto a path of God, onto a path of spirit? Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan says it's very simple. It's one word that also embodies the expansive sound. What's that word? Ma. What does ma mean? Simple Hebrew 101. What? What does that mean to say ma is the beginning point of any spiritual journey? It's to say, I don't know. I don't have the answers. The past may very well not equal the future. Who I am today doesn't necessarily have to be who I will be tomorrow. To say lama, to say why, to say ma, to say what, is to say what if. It's to look at the future, to look at our lives with openness, with godliness, with possibility. And that's what this is a story, what the story is all about. The great mystic Rabbi Nachman says, it's not coincidental that the name for the first human being was Adam. Because Adam doesn't just mean dirt and mud and earth. What does Adam come from? He says it comes from the word dimayon, which means imagination. So what is Adam? Rabbi Nachman says, Adameh, I will imagine. It is for this reason the man is called Adam. He is formed of the Adamah, the ground, the dust of the physical, yet he can ascend above the material world through the use of his imagination and reach the level of prophecy. The Hebrew word I will imagine is Adameh. What does it mean to truly be a human being? Is to live a life of possibility, of infinity, of imagination. And if you look at the great moments and the great people in history, these were men and women, these were moments filled with ma, filled with what if. What if the world is round? What if the sun is at the center and we're not at the center? What if all men are created equal? You know, just Google great men and women in American history. That's what I put in just to see what would come up. And you get the usual suspects, right? You get Lewis and Clark, and Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs, and Albert Einstein, Jonas Salk, Mark Twain, Henry Ford, the Wright brothers, Thomas Edison, Abraham Lincoln. You know this list. We all know this list. We could probably keep going all day long creating this list. And what do they all have in common? Because some are from the arts, and some are from sports, and some are from politics, and some are from science. What do they all have in common? They all said, what if? They all said, ma. What if people could fly? The Wright brothers asked. What if we could harness energy? Thomas Edison. What if we could move beyond horses? Henry Ford. There's a great little anecdote I was reading when I was getting ready for this. In the 1880s, New York City, they were worried about population growth. At the time, it was only a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. And they were worried that this little island couldn't sustain what they projected, and rightly so, as the future population, millions and millions of people. So they gathered a group together to brainstorm, and they came up with, there's no way millions of people can live here. Why? Because how are you going to get millions of horses onto that little island with so much poop? That was their worry. That was their fear. Horse manure. There wasn't enough place to dump all the horse manure. They were thinking linearly. They were thinking that today equals tomorrow. Or in the words of Henry Ford, I hate quoting him, but he was right. If I had asked people what they wanted, he said, they would have said a faster horse. right? That's what we do when we think from this place of assumptions that today equals tomorrow, when the future doesn't have to be linear. It can be exponential. And that's what the great men and women of history teach us, that the future is exponential if we approach it with what if. Right? Breakthroughs don't happen incrementally. I mean, think about it. Breakthroughs are not slow and sure and steady change. Breakthroughs come when great men and women say, what if? And then before you know it, we have a breakthrough that becomes sooner or later an assumption that we all think always was and will be, but it became so through a breakthrough with what if. The two most powerful words in the human language, or wrapped up, encapsulated in this one Hebrew word, ma, what if. So let me end with this, because I'm trying to work it in every single year I'm here. I think I've done it. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, where we celebrate the legacy of this man. I have no idea how that translated into letting kids out of school so they could go to the mall, right? I think it's a shanda, and I think Martin Luther King would have never signed off on that as a celebration of the ideas and values in which he espoused and promoted and stood for. So my goal is to take this man's message and make it live every Shabbat of his memorial, of this weekend of celebration, of remembering this great man. Because this was a man who probably said these words greater than anybody else in modern history, certainly wrote some of the most important texts since the time of the Exodus, and really texts and ideas that embody this what if, all encapsulated in his speech, what if, also known as I Have a Dream. I need you to have a little ruach with this, because I remember last time I read it and you all said it like a bunch of conservative Jews. So I'm going to read it this time, and we're going to channel our inner Martin Luther King, and we're going to respond as if we were really passionate and if we were in a black Baptist church, right, with a bunch of amens and I believes, and get up and testify at any point if you want. Because he wrote, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And I have a dream that one day the Red Hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners, will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. Can I get an amen? I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with his vicious racists, with his governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream. You guys are getting good. That one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and a mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of God shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be great, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia, and let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain in Tennessee, and let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. This is freedom, my friends. This is God. This is good. This is a man who taught us to say, to say, what if? Anything is possible